Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen here with Louis D'Souza and Amy Blackford. And this is your daily dose of happy. We're so happy you decided to join us today. And guys, I just realized I didn't really check my volume. Are you guys hearing me okay? I wanted to make sure.
I'm hearing you great.
You're hearing good? Okay, good. Just wanted to be sure. Because, we want to be heard, and especially with the topic that we have in mind for today. And I'll be getting to that in just a moment. The topic is the Roseto Effect, and it's a very interesting story because it involves a town here in the United States that was studied by scientific researchers trying to figure out why they weren't having heart attacks. But we'll get to that in a moment. First and foremost, though, we actually had somebody who asked a question regarding a show we did on Friday, and I didn't really want to save answering her question until next Friday, if possible. So I thought I'd bring it up with you guys, see what you guys think about for an answer. And she specifically is asking about hypnotism. And I have a former co-host named Wendy Dillard, who is actually a master hypnotherapist. So I sent a request to her. So once I hear back from her, I'll also be sharing that. So Sarah, you're going to get two answers, two sets of answers for your question today. But her question is, what meaning is there to not being able to be hypnotized like I am? I tried it once, and he said I belong to the 5% that aren't able to be brought into trance. So I was wondering, do you guys have any experience with hypnotism to know the answer to that?
I actually, both my mother-in-law and father-in-law are licensed hypnotherapists. And for the longest time, as spiritual as I am, I really thought there's no way you're going to be able to hypnotize me. This isn't. So I went into it actually very skeptical. And my mother-in-law took me through a past life regression. I've only done it once, and it really actually kind of floored me how effective it was. However, I will say if someone isn't going into hypnotism, it could be one of two things from my perspective. Either they aren't comfortable with the practitioner who is taking them into the trance, or they just are not comfortable going to that part of their subconscious mind. And therefore they're blocking the ability to be hypnotized. That's my take on it.
Okay. Louis, do you have any background with hypnotism? I mean, you have explored so many different modalities. I figured hypnotism might be on the list, but I didn't know. So I figured I should ask.
So guess what one of my first experimental things was? It was self-hypnosis.
Ah, okay.
So I was lying in bed. I did my self-hypnosis. I've been doing it for a while. But this specific occasion, I woke up the next morning out of my bed. Now, the bed in the old days, you used to tuck in the sheets. You used to crawl in the sheets and sleep like that. Now, I was out of my bed facing the other way without any recollection of anything. So the thing I like about life or studying life and finding my way is I wanted everything to be 100% conscious. I want to know what's going on. The fact that I was out of bed, facing the other way in the morning with no recollection of what happened in the middle, I was not happy. Game over for hypnotism for me. But what I've heard about somebody who's not, and people have tried to hypnotize me as well before and failed, so I'm in that 5%. They say that intelligent people are easy to hypnotize and stupid people are almost impossible to hypnotize. So
Sure,
I'm a very stupid person.
Oh my goodness, Louis.
You're not doing anything for Sarah's sense of self-esteem. You understand that, don't you?
Well, there's another way of looking at it. It's a way of I've never really called myself educated. And you are educated by your parents, by the vibration of your family, by your friends, by your surroundings, by your belief, by your etc. And I've really kept a very, very open mind so that I'm always absorbing more things and new things. And, I always say I know very little and there's so much I don't know and all those kind of things. And for people like that, I think there's such an openness to learn more and more that I personally wouldn't hand over my power to anybody. Not a hypnotist, nobody, just would not do it. priest or anyone, because I take full responsibility for what I'm doing and where I'm going, and I'm not going to hand it over to anybody. I'm not going to give you the option of, without me really being fully conscious, reprogramming my mind. I'm just not going to have that. So because I've demanded of myself that fully conscious experience of enlightenment and growing and of evolving and unfolding, it's been very important for me to, just from my self-hypnosis experience, which was me doing it to me, and the fact that I didn't know what happened in between during that phase. It was just, hypnosis has also been mentioned. If you don't want to be hypnotized, you look at somebody's third eye while they're trying to hypnotize you, and they're not very good and end up being hypnotized themselves. There can be a reversal effect. So, there's a whole lot of things that you can talk about with hypnosis. And in the end of the day, I'm not really for or against it for anybody else. For myself, I have a preference to go a fully conscious route to enlightenment, and that's my take on the whole thing.
And I'm going to offer an alternative thesis to the one that you're too stupid to be hypnotized. And that is, that you're too conscious to be hypnotized. I mean, one of the things that they really try to do when they're hypnotizing you is they're trying to kind of blur your attention. Because if they can do that, then they can get into the subconscious mind.
I will say, in the experience I had, I was actually very conscious of what was happening. Mm-hmm. So I don't know that I was, if there's a difference between hypnotherapy and being hypnotized. I was very aware of what was happening. My mother-in-law actually taped as she was bringing me through this past life. It was more brought up.
They often do that, yeah.
Yeah, it was more of, she guided me, and I got the body sensory and the memory download, and it was very distinct, and it was almost like I was in a lucid dream is the best way for me to describe it, but I had somebody there documenting it for me. So it was a really interesting thing. But I also, to kind of throw this out there, I think there are lots of different modalities for us to expand our consciousness. And if something isn't working, there's a reason for that. I feel like there is some sort of an intelligent field. I believe we are the creators of our reality, but we are working within this intelligent field, that there might be a reason why you're not supposed to be hypnotized. And that's why it's not working. It's just a different perspective to have on it.
Well, yeah, that's kind of along the lines of what I was going for. I was thinking that if you have a high degree of conscious focus, and by the way, you're right. If I remember correctly, and this is something my friend Wendy is probably going to clarify for us, I think there are levels of hypnosis, levels that, how deeply are they going to take you? Most therapeutic situations, they don't take you as deep as you could possibly go. But partly because it's not ethical to do that. I mean, they want you to have some control over what happens in the process. But it is also possible to take you really, really deep. Interesting thing, though, is if I remember correctly, even if they take you really, really deep, they still can't make you do things you really are not willing to do. You have to have some sort of agreement to do it.
Against your moral compass, they say you won't be able to do it. If they say cluck like a chicken, you don't really have too much of a moral compass like clucking like a chicken. So
yeah, so you can kind of go with
stage performers do manage to get people to do,
and it's very amusing, I have to say. But when you approach all this from a very conscious perspective, I think that's probably what's going on with that 5% who aren't able to easily be hypnotized. They're so consciously focused that the hypnotist can't get that defocusing going on that they really need to have in order to get into the subconscious mind. So I would say congratulations on your focus. That would be my
agree. I think, even when I'm in a state of, what I would call meditation, when I'm channeling or getting this information that is definitely coming to me, it's answering a question that I have, a concern. It's like I'm already there and I don't really need anybody else to guide me through it. Like what Louis was saying, he's kind of he guides himself. And so there isn't that need to have an external source doing it for me.
So good. Okay. Well, we'll have, like I said, I'll have Wendy Dillard give us her take on it. I'm sure she'll send me an email or something like that pretty soon. And when that happens, sir, I'll share it on the next available program. But in the meantime, I want to get to the main topic that I had lined up for today. And this is something I really only became aware of very recently. I can't say that entirely. I was sort of semi-aware of it in the distant past, but it's not something I had really given any thought to. And when I heard about this time, the little flags were going off in my head, little alarm bells saying, this is LOA, this is LOA, this is LOA.
Okay.
And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that that was true. So that's why I wanted to bring it in here. It's called the Roseto Effect, and it's named for a town in Pennsylvania, a little town of 1,600 people that was founded originally in 1912 by a bunch of Italian immigrants. It is located about 75 miles east of New York City. It's about 55 miles southeast of Scranton, Pennsylvania, where the new president-elect was born, Joe Biden. It's about 30 miles north of Allentown, Pennsylvania, which is where back in the day, all of the major steel mills were located. So a lot of the steel production took place there. And the town itself is basically, during the 50s and 60s anyway, it was almost exclusively Italian American. And an interesting phenomenon was occurring there. No one was dying of heart disease. And their local doctors didn't know why, because especially at that point in our US history, heart disease and heart attacks were the #1 cause of death, and they're still a major cause of death here in the country. But back then they were definitely at the top of the list. And here was a town where it wasn't happening. And not only was it not happening, it's not like any of the people who lived in this town were following any of the guidelines we would follow today.
Right.
Now, most of those guidelines hadn't even been laid out yet. But, if you kind of
In terms
compare
of smoking, what they were eating, their exercise.
They were eating the wrong foods. There was a high carb diet. It was high in fats, high cholesterol. I mean, it was no exercise. They were smoking cigars. They're drinking excessive amounts of wine. I mean, it's just like one thing after another that you're not supposed to do. They were working high risk. A lot of people were working in high risk careers and jobs. I mean, it was just like all the worst possible factors you could have, and yet they weren't having heart attacks. And how could that be? So some researchers from the University of Oklahoma came in and started doing some really in-depth studying. They were interviewing everybody in town, hundreds and hundreds of questions of everybody, trying to narrow down what was going on. And after all their studies were done and they did all their calculations and so forth, the conclusion they came to was that it had nothing to do with anything specifically medical, had nothing to do with diet, exercise, right? It had to do with their community. Because when they arrived in this country, they brought with them the old world, their old world way of having community in Italy. And in fact, there was a PBS special about this town that was done a few years back. I don't remember exactly when, but I saw a clip from it. And in the clip, one of the things they noted is that, of course, these people came over at a time when America was having a huge influx of immigrants. And they were among that influx. Among the Italians who came over, the Italians were largely horrified with the way Americans lived, particularly the way their communities were organized. And some of them actually returned to Italy. That doesn't get a lot of attention. But a lot of the immigrants, not a lot, a significant proportion, let's put it that way, returned to Italy saying, well, as bad as it was in Italy, it's even worse here. I'm going back. But the ones who stayed, they retained a lot of, how they'd always done things. And this particular group that formed this little town, this little enclave really in Pennsylvania, basically retained their old world values. And their old world values were about living in a community where they all knew each other and they are all supportive to each other. And what the researchers realized is that all of the people who lived in this town felt absolutely safe. They felt emotionally safe. They felt economically safe. The example in the PBS special was they knew that if they fell on hard times, their neighbor had a cow in a garden, so they'd be fine.
That's right.
They felt politically safe. They definitely felt socially safe. They all knew each other. They all had the same shared values. And as a result, it was their social cohesiveness that actually directly caused them to have not only fewer heart attacks, but they had extremely low rates of people on government assistance. They there was a whole series of factors. So like marriages lasted longer, relationships lasted longer, people
Right.
stayed home longer. I mean, it was just like one thing after another that was coming out of this. And it was all because of that, those old world social cohesive structures that they had retained when they got here. And then the other interesting fact is that now this was from the mid 1950s, like 1955 to 1965 that this happened. And then like everywhere else in this country, from like the late 60s on, there was like this diaspora where people started moving away from home, and nobody ever stayed in one place for any great length of time. And of course, this kind of thing happens around the world too, but it started happening here in America in a big way. And from that point on, Rosetta no longer stood out as an anomaly in America. They started having the same levels of heart attacks and everything else. So it was definitely that level of social cohesiveness. And in fact, another study of the original study was done 50 years later to check to see, well, did they miss something? Did they fail to take into account other trends? And they went through, checked all the data and checked some data that wasn't checked. And they concluded, yep, the conclusions were correct. So what we learn from this, and this is not what's presented in the PBS special, you have to kind of infer this, but it's not difficult to infer. They had better health despite doing everything wrong because of their thoughts and beliefs. They thought and believed their way to better health, even though they had no intention of thinking and believing their way to better health. In other words, the way we would describe it here on the program is they did it by default.
Right.
Which is really interesting.
Well, just by having that social cohesiveness and that harmonics, it kept their vibration very high.
Exactly.
Not being stressed out about where their children are, about, like you were saying, if they fell on hard times, they had a community that they could rely on. And that goes a really long way. The more isolated and separated humans are, the less we flourish. We do not do as well as when we are in communities, when we are in flourishing connections, marriages. It doesn't even need to be a marriage. It's not about the piece of paper, but in partnerships, maybe that's a better word. It's kind of this chemistry that we have together. So yes, one person's power is one person's power, but when you start multiplying that and gathering that in a community, the power increases. It's the same thing with the concept people with, they say prayer. If you have one person praying for something, or you get a group of people praying together or meditating, however you want to put it, they're all focused on one goal. The outcome is going to increase the chances of getting the outcome that you're desiring. So I think that's really interesting.
It is interesting. Yeah. I was doing some research for some stuff that I'm doing. And it involved the work of Sean Achor, who is the positive psychology guy. He's given TED Talk and he's done a whole bunch of stuff. He wrote a book called The Happiness Advantage. One of the stories that he tells in that book is the story of how he went to Harvard, and then he was also a teaching assistant at Harvard under the professor who first started the positive psychology program at Harvard. And he was also a resident advisor. So he lived in the dorms for 12 years. And during that time, he was studying the students who would come and go as part of his own advanced study in psychology. And he tells the story about these two freshmen who come into the one dorm that he's in one year. I believe their names are Amanda and Brittany. And they were roommates. And they were very, very similar, very spirited personalities, very, very similar. I mean, you know how rare it is in college to be hooked up with the right roommate. Well, they were definitely hooked up with the right roommate. They were just like two peas in a pod in that sense, except for one thing. And that one thing is the way they handled the pressures of being at Harvard. Sean, of course, talks a lot about the pressures of being at Harvard. He waxes eloquently about it. And I think we can all kind of imagine what it's like. It's the most elite school in the United States, one of the more elite schools in the world. So the pressures are extremely high. And how you handle those pressures is going to directly affect and impact your success level. Well, Amanda, her response to the pressure was to basically buy a cubicle. I mean, she didn't buy it, but basically reserve a cubicle for herself in the library and just focus on her work continuously, day and night. Brittany was also doing her work, but she also created study groups, and then she would organize social activities. And she basically was like the dorm organizer. So that's where the two differed. One went off into the cubicle, the other one became the social activities director. And by the end of the semester, the one who was in the cubicle was basically about ready to quit Harvard and go find a less competitive school. The one who was the social director was having a great time and performing brilliantly.
Absolutely. Makes perfect sense.
Because she had all the social connectivity.
Yeah, and when you're having fun with something, you know, and your energy that is going to raise your vibration, it's going to, not only are you assimilating the information quicker and more efficiently, just by engaging with others, talking about it, like we're doing here today, you know, talking about the law of attraction. That's why we do this, is because it just increases your ability to expand on that knowledge, and it makes it playful and fun. And when you put all of those elements together, it's going to produce much better results.
It does. So I've been going on a little bit about this, and Louis, you've been really quiet, which is very unusual for you. So I have to bring you into the conversation and ask you, what do you think about the Roseto effect and what we're talking about here?
Well, you said they come from Italy, which means Mediterranean lifestyle, which means a huge history of low heart attacks and great health.
Despite the generally
no, was generally attributed to the diet, which was a lot of salads and
yeah,
and a lot of fresh air and a lot of socializing. So, you know, it's not that surprising when somebody's able to take that vibration from another country and put it into a town and be the same vibration, you know, bringing from a law of attraction point of view, bringing in that active vibration which they've built up over centuries, and being able to hold it in their smaller community. Obviously that community is going to get whittled down with the numerous other vibrations, which is based around, you know, the Italian falling in love with the American boy and all the rest of it, a girl. So you get that intermarrying, which you get the intermingling of the different vibrations, and then everything starts changing. And you know, what I feel the whole world is going through at the moment is a huge vibrationally marriage between all different races, of all different cultures, of all different beliefs. And it's really turning into quite an interesting melting pot, that the sources that are coming out of it are quite interesting. And I'm looking really forward to see how the world progresses with that, which I believe is going to be a more overriding vibration, which is going to be that mixture vibration, as opposed to any one specific group dominating in any specific way.
I think
it'll
you're right.
just be interesting to see how that progresses, because, you know, we're into it already. I mean, what I'd say we're a quarter into it. I don't know.
Okay, that's a good estimate.
I don't know, but you know, I just think that it's interesting being born in this time frame. You know, I was born when there was not even a computer, there wasn't a TV, it didn't exist.
Right.
You know, and then slowly a TV rocks up when I'm 16 years old in the lounge.
And now we're carrying them around in our hands.
No, I know. I mean, and then, you know, Dad brings home a computer eventually, and he forces me to type on it. Otherwise, I couldn't use it. So I learned to touch type. You know, the only thing I could use on his computer was a touch type thing, which I'm so grateful for. Being able to touch type in this day and age is quite
absolutely
cool. Yeah. And you know, building up through that whole 60s, and I don't need no education. I don't need no thought control. Hey, teacher, leave us kids alone. So you're going through the whole revolution of the 60s. You're going through the evolution, the involution of the 70s. You're going through the more enlightened phase, which we're going through at the moment. And, you know, to be born in the middle of all of that is just so exciting. And to watch the different vibrations and the different groups, and, you know, studying them like that Rosetta town, making a study of it. I'm so glad somebody had the gumption to go out there and do that.
Yeah.
And make something out of it. But it didn't succeed very well, because information they took out to the world, the drug companies couldn't sell good social activities. So I don't think it was promoted very well. I'm sure it was squashed a little bit as well.
Well, plus also the spin on the story was more about how wonderful those Italian Americans were, rather than how wonderful the result was that told us that our minds and our beliefs actually control our experiences. So, the spin makes a huge difference, I think. But I agree with you. I mean, I think we all pretty much agree there's a vibrational shift that's going on. Call it an awakening, call it whatever you want to call it. And I think one of the characteristics of that shift, that change that's happening, is that as the shift happens, I think even the stuff that kind of got lost gets brought in. I mean, I don't think there's any mistake. I don't think there's any fake, not disconnected connectivity, coincidence that isn't really connected kind of a thing, where I was focusing on this Roseto Effect thing over the last few days. And then my wife tells me that one of the major TV networks on the Sunday morning show did a whole thing on the Roseto Effect. Now, we haven't been talking about this for years.
Why does that not surprise me?
I mean, it has been literally decades since this thing's been talked about. And now all of a sudden,
you LOA guru, you.
Yeah, how about that?
What I think is amazing is showing the different cultures. In Italian culture, they take their siesta halfway through the day. In American culture, it's this 9 to 5, work all day, the stress. People are kids are sent to school all day. It's just the entire culture over here is so different. Any of my friends that have traveled the world, they always tell me, I have not done a lot of traveling. I've gone, to Paris. That's really out of the country, other than the Caribbean, which was completely Aruba. I thought, I never want to leave this place. Everyone is so relaxed.
Yes.
It's not even just the people that are there on vacation, just the natives that live there. Their entire attitude towards life was so opposite of American, because you don't understand until you travel how different the different cultures are. And so I think that's one thing we are seeing over here, is the structure that we have is not meant for people to flourish in. We're all so isolated and separate. And then just the structure of many of our days. I'm very fortunate, because I feel like I've kind of broken free of that by getting to work at home, getting to make my own schedule. It's amazing. So I feel really excited for those of us that are paving our own path. But I'd love to see more and more people over here getting to do the same for themselves.
And yet I think it's happening. I mean, look, it's one of the results of COVID.
Agreed.
I mean, COVID, this horrible pandemic, has caused literally tens of millions of people who used to work in office buildings do now work at home, just because it's not safe for them to go into the office buildings.
Well, so and it's shown
likely that they're not going back either.
That's right. Exactly right. Yeah.
And now it's shown not only employees, but companies that they can function this way, and everyone's happier.
Yeah. Not only can they function profitably.
Exactly.
I mean, our next door neighbor is I think she's a bookkeeper. I can't remember where she works at. It's a relatively small company nearby. I don't remember what the company was, but she had been working in the office for years and years. Of course, now she's working at home. And her comment to my wife the other day was, I don't think they're going to ask me to come back to the office. I think I'm working at home from now on. And I love it.
That's
the reaction a lot of people are having now. So even though nobody planned it, even though nobody, at least consciously planned it, even though nobody really wanted it to happen because of COVID, it finally worked its way in anyway. And I think that's really what the point is. It doesn't really matter that people didn't know what the Roseto Effect was. What matters is it's working its way in anyway.
Yes.
It's the same thing that's happening with elder care. One of the big problems with COVID is that because of the forced isolation, people who are dealing with the COVID disease, who are also in, say, nursing homes or senior centers or whatever, are finding that they're so isolated, they can't even see their loved ones. They get sick and their loved ones aren't able to come visit them. They have to look at them on a video screen.
Right.
And it's directly impacting their ability to get better.
Yes.
And that's being noticed. That was never noticed before. So once again, this horrible thing, COVID, is producing a result that's actually, I think, going to be very healthy in the long run. It's going to
I
help
mean,
us
I've thought
recognize
that from
we
the
need the
beginning as
community.
well. There's always,
Yeah.
I hate to sound cliche, but everything happens for a reason. And we were at a breaking point. And this is part of, to me, things bouncing back in a positive way. And I know how many people are suffering, and I hate seeing that. But we have to start looking at and focusing on, if we all can summon the courage to do that, look at the positives, because as we do that, that is when we're going to see an acceleration of actually getting past this time where people are still very afraid, and we aren't over the hump yet, obviously, because we're still in the middle of dealing with it. But the more we can all focus on the positives that are coming out of it, the quicker it can accelerate, and we can move past it.
You were saying,
I must
Louis?
say, yeah, I must say the second lockdown, people are taking it far more relaxedly than that first one. It's like cheese and chalk. Nobody would even speak to each other.
Everyone kind of, I think, is adjusted to this in a way. I don't want to say that's a good thing, but it's brought the fear factor down. It's kind of like
massively.
Yeah, the fear factor is not as intense as it was in the very beginning. We're going to get through this, and we're going to come out the other side with a much stronger, I think, society and a community. I'm seeing so many people bonding together over it, being there for their neighbors. I've noticed a huge shift in the way people are treating one another. So I know some people are having the opposite experience of that. It's because you're still holding fear and negativity. And so you keep seeing that reflected. If you would start seeing the positives, you will start seeing this whole other kind of reality that's coming out of it.
Yeah.
And it's cool.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, my wife is in a palliative care home where people go to die, and she's a nurse, and it's interesting because they've lost half the nursing home and not one of them to COVID.
Wow.
Yeah, so just because people can't have their loved ones come and visit them, it's had a huge impact. Absolutely huge.
And that ties right into what you were bringing in with Roseto.
Yep.
Roseto.
Yeah.
That
Roseto, Roseto. So Rose
right,
too.
It's basically tying right back into that when we lose. That's why also you'll have two people that have been married forever. I had an uncle and an aunt, and they were married. It was like 75 years. And she died literally 2 days after he did. And the doctor said she died of a broken heart. There was no other explanation. They were just that connected energetically that once he was gone, she left. You know, so there's that sense of, there's that bond. I think it's actually a beautiful thing. It sounds tragic, but it's actually beautiful.
Well, it depends how you look at it. I think that what it really is a recognition that we're all kind of getting to, so to speak, that this kind of thing is important. Community is important. Connection is important. Social interaction is important. I mean, it's one of the points that Sean Aker makes in that book that I mentioned, The Happiness Advantage. He says that the result factor from when they do all their statistics is 0.7, which doesn't sound like a lot, but that's actually a higher incidence of connectivity than the likelihood of smoking and getting cancer. I mean, it's such an incredible correlation that it just blew their minds when they first found out that there's this huge connection between social interaction on the one hand, social connectivity, and success, happiness, longevity, health, wealth, abundance, everything on the other hand. I mean, it's a massive connection. So,
I mean,
by the way,
think about it.
I also want to mention one other thing. I did look up the word Roseto because I was curious to know why they named it Roseto, Pennsylvania. Roseto in Italian means rose garden.
Oh, I love that.
Oh, okay.
Isn't that nice?
Yeah.
But there's the Rosetta stone as well. I can't remember what that's all about. There's something about that.
That's a language. It's a language program.
Yeah, it's a way of
no. There's something ancient about it as well. There's some.
Yeah, it derives from something. Yeah, and I can't remember what it derives from. Oh, here it is.
Beautiful.
I got it. It derives from ancient Egypt, actually.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure exactly what it's saying here, so I'll save that for another time.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting, the Rosetta Stone. There's something really fascinating about it, but I can't remember. I have touched on it before.
But the
But
Roseto
I like what
as a rose garden. Oh, go ahead.
I like what Jeff was saying here. He says hypnosis is a great and safe way to release fear. So everybody's got different opinions about it, and mine works for me, and that's all I'm saying. If hypnosis feels good for you, go for it. Yeah, absolutely.
There's so many modalities to explore your own consciousness and different therapies, whatever you're basically attracted to. So like if you really want to have out of body experiences, but you just can't get there, then you're not really meant to have those experiences. So that's kind of how I look at it. Same thing with hypnosis. If you've tried to be hypnotized and it's not working, there's a reason for that. And that I don't think there's a negative or a positive to it. There's just so
your
many
higher
different ways
self
to
can say
expand.
that this is not going to help you expand at the moment. I'm going to cut it off.
Yes.
And Carolyn Mace mentioned that quite often. She was really weak health-wise, and I mean, she's the health guru,
Yeah.
So she was really, really weak at one stage, and she went to this most amazing healer, and he wanted to heal her, and he looked at her and he said, "No, I'm afraid they won't allow me to. Goodbye."
Wow.
He could see her guardians, and they were saying, "No, don't touch this lady. You're not going to take away her lesson and her growth. Bye-bye."
Wow. That's really powerful.
And that's Carolyn Mace.
Jeffrey also shared information about the Rosetta Stone. He apparently was more familiar with it than we are. He says the Rosetta Stone was the way we were able to translate Egyptian hieroglyphics and Sumerian cuneiform. So there we go.
Oh, that's really neat. So that's why the name of the program that I'm thinking of that's advertised as Rosetta Stone, that's why it's called that. That is so cool.
That's right.
Learn something new every day.
That's it. Yeah. But I did like the idea that Rosetta was the translation of the word rose garden, because rose garden, when you think of that phrase, I think, well, maybe not everybody. Like I know myself, and I think of anything garden, it's like, oh God, keep me away from it. I have a black thumb. But for most people, a rose garden is a place of calm, and it's a place of beauty and solace and relaxation and so forth. And how appropriate that they named their town after that concept, because that's what they created. They created essentially a social Eden, if you will.
Absolutely. When I was a little girl, we had a house and it was right near a rose garden. It was called the Rose Garden, and we would have picnics there. And Rose is a family name in my family, and we're part Italian. And I used to love to draw them. So the rose is a beautiful symbol for me. So I really, really enjoyed hearing that little tidbit weaved in.
How many other ways can we point to that we're seeing shifts going on in the way people think about community? Like when I think about it here in the US, I don't necessarily see large scale shifts going on, but I see it in little ways. I see it in like the neighborhood we live in. We live in an apartment complex. And when we first moved into this complex, which was about 6 years ago, something like that, we didn't know a lot of people, and there wasn't a whole lot of communication between people. I mean, people pretty much kept to themselves. And since we moved in, now I'm going to partly attribute this to us because of how social we are, but we now have connections with all of our neighbors on both sides of us, and a few houses, a few doors down and so forth. And there's like, there's like daily greetings. We go outside. Louise will be hanging outside, sitting in the sun or something like that. And she'll start up a conversation with the other neighbor, 4 doors down, it comes out, and they're chatting about stuff while she's getting over to her car. And it's like, it's becoming more community-like. And I have this feeling that may be happening in a lot of places around the United States without being reported on. I was just curious to know whether you've seen that, Amy. And Louis, I was wondering if you're seeing anything like that in London area in the UK.
I'm definitely having that experience in my new home. It started immediately with our neighbors. Mail was dropped off on our doorstep, and the neighbors came over and we kept it for them, and we met them that way. Then the neighbors on the other side had something happen to us, and they came over and told us about it. So my husband programmed their numbers in. Yesterday, they knock on my door. Their car was dead. I helped them jump their car. And I even thought to myself, what a shift from just, this apartment complex that I was living in where nobody spoke to each other. I didn't know any of my neighbors for the longest time. And suddenly I know I've only lived in this neighborhood for a few months and I already have communications and connections with the people living here. And I'm seeing more and more of that at the grocery store, people that are strangers talking to each other, which 5 to 10 years ago, I didn't see at all here in America. And it does seem like, again, the pandemic has brought out this, instead of people pushing people apart, people are feeling more bonded and looking to each other for support wherever they're going. What about you, Louie?
Well, just to give you an example, I am into woodwork. You know, I got the garage, so I bought a woodwork table and I started adding all the bits and pieces to it. So I joined a Facebook woodworking group, and I was absolutely in awe. You know, one guy said, "Oh, I've just created this. What are you guys creating at the moment?" And like 300,000 posts later, the most incredible designs and things that people are popping up. And I'm going, oh my God, I just want to know how to make a square box. These guys are carving these incredible things and all the rest of it. And I'm like, oh, okay, I got a way to go.
Well, I found an author community on Facebook. So the internet, having you all, you know, being able to talk about the law of attraction, the level of community that I'm finding in the things that I'm really jazzed about and I'm excited about. I'm finding all of these different avenues that honestly 5 years ago were not even available to me whatsoever. So yes, well, I'm definitely seeing an acceleration in the interconnectedness of community that's happening everywhere.
You know, my daughter was saying to me the other day, God, you talk to anybody. It's like, yeah, why shouldn't I? It's so easy to speak to anybody. Once you're confident, you can literally have a conversation with anybody about anything.
And you find that you want to.
Exactly. And, you know, and this interaction between people is just so important. It's so enlivening. You know, a friend of mine who was suffering many years ago, about 20 years ago, he was suffering a lot from, you know, he was a programmer. So you can probably relate to this with your brother, Walt.
I can relate to it myself.
Yeah. And, you know, he was just stuck behind a computer with digital friends. And he went out and he started partying and he started interacting with people, and it's just completely changed him. And he was saying, can't believe just socializing is so much better for me and so much healthier, and it's changed my life. But it does. But another thing that happened was my wife is really into cooking and baking and making these things. So just to give you an example, she's made blackberry and apple jam, herbal salts with chili, cranberry jelly, quince jelly, crab apple jelly, lemon marmalade, Christmas
You're
chutney,
making me hungry, Louie.
big jam, vegetable stock, soup mix, red berry jam, rhubarb chutney, and so it goes on. And she's also gone on a community on the web.
Nice.
And, you know, she's, you know, she can relate so well to all these different people with all the stuff that she can create. And it's just amazing, you know, the different communities and the way people are communicating at the moment, specifically even more so during the lockdown and during this last year.
I agree 100%.
It's exciting too
because my
sister's
even enjoying, I know a lot of people are not enjoying having their children at home being homeschooled. And this is my first time my sister's gotten to like really be with her children and not have to be outside the house working. And she's actually really enjoying the time with, you know, her little ones and kind of having this experience. I know it's very stressful for a lot of people, so I'm not trying to take away from that, but there is this kind of new way of communicating through Zoom, you know, people kind of reaching out to each other in ways that they weren't before.
You know, it was really exciting
that
for me.
Fabulous.
Let's all talk at once.
Yes.
Yeah, let's see if we can do that. We'll talk over each other and nobody will be able to understand what we're saying. So you go ahead, Louie.
Right at the beginning when Skype came in, you know, one of the first communication tools of type chatting, even before that, there were these little applications which I had going there, and I got the whole family on and we were all yapping away. And then everybody realized we were just talking rubbish, and then it just died like that. And I realized, yeah, you really have to have some solid content going on there. And some kind of definite community and direction of where you want to be and what you want to talk about.
I would agree with that.
Well, what I do now sometimes with my brother and sister is, my sister's in the Netherlands as well now. She's now in South Africa. But, and my brother was here in the UK, and we'd get on let's have a glass of wine and let's chat. And it was just such a nice way to catch up, just to have a quick catch up over a glass of wine. I've got my partner, they've got their partners, and it's just all four of us, and we're sitting there, and it's just really great. And that's just something that people can do, with family, and it really works, just to make it more of a social setting that you would be in real life. I mean, if they were coming to your home. So yeah, it's just a suggestion to do with the video conferencing, because it really worked well with us.
It's helpful. And I think when things do go back to normal, aren't we all going to appreciate it a little bit more?
Exactly. Absolutely.
That's true.
My daughter was saying, I want to go back to school. I want to go back to school. It's like, I'm missing
I think
school.
it's also the fact that you were talking about the commonality of interest. I think that's a really important point, because when we have that commonality of interest, we have more to relate about. I mean, that's what conversation is. Conversation is relating, telling stories, sharing experiences and so forth, because of that common interest or that common affiliation. And I think that's one of the reasons that Roseto worked. They had the common affiliation of coming from Italy,
right?
Coming from the old country. They were all, first generations for the most part, or they were the actual original immigrants, depending on which generation you're looking at. And they were just that they had that huge common culture,
right?
That made the whole thing work. What we're trying to do today is we're trying to kind of recreate that, which is good. And we're finding new ways to do it, ways that didn't exist before, such as through social media and online groups of various interest types. I mean, woodworking groups. I mean, when could you'd have to go back to like the Middle Ages to find, the guilds of woodworkers
Yes.
who would work together. That would be about the last, example before now. Well, it's almost like we're kind of reinventing the guilds.
Well, now that
how
we're
successful
in
they were.
more
Thieves
modern
Guilds comes to
times,
mind, but I'm
well, okay.
Now that we're in more modern times, we don't need community necessarily to live, to rely on each other. You've got the farmer, you've got the person who makes the clothing.
You don't need the guy next door to jump you. You just phone the AA. Yeah.
Now it is more about common interests and things that excite us. And so that's a very valid point, that sense of community doesn't just come from a bunch of people gathering together. There needs to be some sort of a need or an interconnectedness that goes beyond just a bunch of people standing in one room together. There's got to be that common thing, interest, whatever it is.
That was one of the words that stood out to me when I was reading about the Roseto Effect and how the researchers had kind of summarized what had happened, what they had discovered, that the people who lived in that community felt safe. That word safe jumped out at me. People today, especially, like the idea of seeking safety, sometimes to the point of extremes.
Yeah.
And as I think about it, safety actually could have a number of different meanings. I mean, the obvious original meaning is, well, you're safe from being physically attacked or harmed or, something along that line. But safety can actually have a number of different meanings. In the context of community, it could be the safety of numbers, but it could also be the safety of common interest and the safety of knowing that you have other people who think and feel like you do, or in an affinity with you, so that you can count on them, so that they can trust you and you can trust them. Because trust, we already know from an LOA perspective how important trust really is. I think it's probably also important from a community perspective. The more trust that the community members have for each other, the stronger the community becomes, and the stronger the community becomes, the stronger the individuals become. You were talking about that, Louis, about the building of that sense of self-confidence, self-esteem, self-worth. Well, the two go hand in hand, I think. So when I look at it that way, I say to myself, wow, that sense of safety has an entirely broader meaning and a much more important meaning. I think it's a meaning that really cuts to the quick of what really made the whole Roseto Effect work. I mean, that's my take anyway.
What I was realizing in the sauna the other day, having some really good chats again, back in the sauna, I'm so
Back in
happy,
the
so
sauna.
happy. I was getting really passionate about something, and the lady said, "Wow, I really enjoy your passion. I really enjoy your passion." And when you have common interests, you do start sharing that passion. If I start talk to somebody who's not into gardening about gardening, or Walt, who doesn't have a green thumb. No.
I just run a gardening
have...
service. I don't like gardening. I just run the service.
Yeah. If I start talking avidly about gardening, you may blank
this
over.
is why I have gardeners working for me, because they are the ones who have all the passion for it. I just pay the paycheck.
Yeah. But it really is nice chatting to you guys, because you guys understand LOA, and you can relate, and there's so many aspects that you can talk about and build on. It's like a building block from step to step by step, and you can really grow together, and that's it's nice.
And that's what makes it fun.
Jeffrey made an interesting point in the live stream. He says, "This is a great time of year to bond with neighbors and strangers." He says, "I bake and leave food out for my neighbors, season's greetings."
Oh,
and
I love
that's
that.
a different take on the holiday season, because probably the most common topic about holiday season is depression and anxiety and dealing with family, distorted dynamics and so forth. When was the last time we heard a conversation about building community through season's greetings? I like that.
I've always been that way, even though my family have the typical, you've got those tensions. For me, it's always been a time to give and to show love to others. And I'm just a celebratory type of a person. And so even though there is some of that other emotional baggage, I always would select and choose what feels better. And for me, it's focusing on the fun, whether it's the gift giving, like he was saying, just baking things or doing nice things for people and kind of going out of your way at that time. I try to do that all year round, but it's especially fun during the holidays.
Yeah, my wife baked a whole bunch of things and gave them to our neighbors. Well, we've done it most years, and our neighbor came around today and said, "Oh, I'm so appreciative. That is so nice." That and you can really feel the genuineness of the comments.
Absolutely. People appreciate that.
I'm seeing it in my wife this year. Since we've moved back to Connecticut, we really hadn't done much with Christmas trees, just because our apartment is so small. I mean, it's like a postage stamp. But this year we decided we're going to do something, and we actually got rid of some furniture and got a smaller piece of furniture so we could create a little more room. And so we have this little Christmas tree, stacked in the corner. But the effect it's had on my wife is just an amazing effect. I mean, she has been decorating and decorating and decorating as a result of that. And it's picked her up. It's also picked up the community, in the sense that the rest of the complex can't see the Christmas tree from where it's located. Nobody would be able to see it except for us. But because of her enthusiasm, her conversations with neighbors is now getting into, let's get excited about the holiday season. Right. And they're talking about now, I'm willing to bet before those conversations took place, they had some degree of excitement, but this was building the excitement. This is building the anticipation and the enthusiasm for just finding joy in the season. When you get that going on, I mean, there's a great basis for building community right there.
That's right.
It was quite interesting. My wife crocheted when she was younger in Austria. You got clear round balls, and she crocheted all around them like snowflakes. And she made little angels out of crocheting and all the rest of it, all decorations for the Christmas tree. And she's used them at the nursing home quite often over the years, because we got Austria and we never really put up our own tree. This year is the first year in probably 20 years that I haven't been to Austria, and that we're making our own Christmas here because of COVID. So one of the nurses really, really liked them and said, "Will you do some for me?" So she did them for her, and the lady gave her £500 for it. And it's just like unbelievable.
Nice.
That's wonderful.
Really?
I got one of those small trees too, Walt, because we moved. I didn't want to do a lot because we're already doing so much in the house. So it's like a 4-foot tray, But immediately when I put it in the living room, it's just like what you were saying. I was not into Christmas this year. I'm like, it's too much. I'm moving. I'm done. And the minute I put the tree up, the cats were sleeping under it. And it really did lift. It really shifted the energy in the home. It was like, okay, this is our home. We're settled. It's our first Christmas here. So it's interesting how these types of traditions really can have an effect on our energy as well.
It's true. In fact, you mentioned cats. Our cats had never seen a Christmas tree before. So this was a bit of a novelty, like sniffing it. Like, is this thing going to attack me?
Oh, they love it.
Yeah, we went out and bought a real Christmas tree as well. And the kids just love decorating it.
Fantastic.
And, you know, got the lights and everything. And it's, I'm looking forward to having Christmas in my own home for the first time ever. Since I've been in this house, I've never had Christmas here, never.
I wonder how many people are experiencing that for the first time. I mean, Louise and I have had Christmas before. It's been a number of years since we had a tree, but we have done it before. But I get the impression there are a lot of people who don't do Christmas at home anymore. A lot of people do visiting to other people's homes, you know, so they experience that. But more and more people now are experiencing it in their own homes again because of lockdowns and COVID and all that kind of thing. And it's a new experience. It's almost like they're reinventing their childhood, if you know what I mean.
Right.
Which is kind of cool.
It is.
So once again, we found another way to say, hey, there's good things coming out of COVID.
That's right.
That was the other thing that I was thinking about too, when we were going through all these examples. We're taught by, you know, Abrahams of the world, the law of attraction gurus and teachers, the importance of finding ways to take things we don't like and identify what we do like about them. Looking for ways to pivot, looking for the silver linings and so forth. And here we have a whole population of people who, without any knowledge or awareness of how the law of attraction or conscious creation works, are doing it anyway. They are finding ways to appreciate what's going on. They're finding ways to appreciate connecting online because they don't have other ways they can connect. They're finding ways to appreciate being with family that they weren't ever doing before without having, it's almost like it's Roseto all over again, because Roseto, the people of Roseto had no idea what they were doing consciously.
Right.
There was no sense that they were saying, well, we're going to reduce our heart attack incidents. No, that wasn't even part of the conversation.
Right.
It's all that red wine they were drinking, isn't it?
It was the red wine. That's right.
I wonder who made that advertising ploy.
And it was the good stuff too, I have to, I'm sure.
Oh, yes. Not the plum.
Yeah, all right. I love the fact that I'm glad I brought this in, because this is something that, this is the kind of thing I think we need to notice more of. I'm going to be paying more attention to see what's out there that's already been happening that kind of reinforces the topics that we talk about here on the show. So I was glad to find this one to bring in there. And if you guys spot anything, you know, along the same lines, by all means, bring it in. I do want to take a moment just to remind people to use the LOA Today app to, if they have a question they want to send in, to have us address. That's basically what Sarah did. She did it actually through YouTube, but the app is designed, among other things, for people to send questions in and share comments. So take advantage of that. More and more people are doing that. We love that, but we want to hear from you too. So if you've been kind of holding back and saying, you know, I'm just going to lurk here a little bit, stop being a lurker. Send in a question, send in a comment. You know, it is the best. Guys, am I wrong or am I right? Isn't it the best thing in the world when we get an email?
You're absolutely right.
I mean, seriously, there's nothing better than that. And plus you get to hear your own comments and stuff, you know, reflected back to you on the podcast. So it's a win-win both ways. So, all right, well, good stuff. And we have a topic that Amy has come up with for next week. And can you give it like a 10-second spoiler on that one?
Basically, it's just, I've been noticing a lot of people talking about things getting much worse before they're going to get better. And I believe that there are lots of different realities that could happen, and that we kind of get to select through the law of attraction and what we focus on, which one of those we're going to experience. I think it's a really important time for people to begin focusing on the reality that they want to see happen. It does not need to get worse for it to get better. And so we'll end it there.
Okay. So that's good. That's going to be a good topic for next week. So
Okay,
in the meantime, thank you guys very much for all your input. Thank you, live streamers, especially thank you to our podcast listeners. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye,
Thank you, everyone.
Take care, guys.